Masvidal versus Darren Till, and I did not like the way that this was promoted from the jump. And I don't mean that on the promotion standpoint. I mean from you guys, from fellow members of the media. Somehow the storyline of this fight from day one, and nobody could get off it, was that Masvidal was giving up too much size. Open and shut case. Open the book, close the book, nothing to see here. Masvidal's too small to go with Till, the end. He's going to go out there and give it the old college try, and if he can make it several rounds, then great, we'll all be entertained, but there's just simply nothing to see. I don't know where that started. What are you talking about? First off, you're talking about 15 pounds. I mean, from the beginning. I mean, the sport's become wussified to the point that we even give a damn about 15 pounds. I mean, the foggiest, I don't know a fighter that cares about 15 pounds, at least not from my generation. But for some reasons, that really carried over to the fans, and that was all there was to see. I think if you would have just looked a little bit closer, particularly with the benefit of hindsight, but if you would have looked a little bit closer, you would have seen a dynamic, aggressive, stand-up fighter in Darren Till taking on a guy that wants to sing that same song. That is Masvidal's game. Let's go out there and put our chins down and see how many punches and kicks and knees and elbows we can give to the other guy. And let's not even talk about this whole going to the ground business. So matchup-wise, it was compelling. Now you can still place your bets. Do you like the longer reach of Till? Do you like the youthfulness of Till? Do you like the experience of Masvidal? But that, I always thought that should have been the story. And particularly when you're talking about a stand-up fight, and guys, we cover this all the time. It does not favor the bigger guy. The only time that size advantage is a true advantage is when you're grappling. When you're standing up, it always favors the smaller guy. There's a reason that the super heavyweight division is not even contested in modern day boxing. Many of you forget that it even exists. It doesn't exist because they're not any good, and they're not any good because they're too slow to move. You guys, many of you, think that heavyweight is the highest class that commissions regulate and sanction in boxing. You're wrong. They have a super heavyweight class where they take them above the limit. You can weigh 400 pounds and get in there, and a commission will sanction it. It's never featured because those guys suck at the sport. And it's not a knock to the guys. The sport requires speed. Muhammad Ali in his prime, 198 pounds. Mike Tyson in his prime, 220 pounds. You can even carry it over to MMA, from the Stipes to the Cormiers to the Verdums to the Fedors to the Coutures of the world. They don't meet the weight limit. I don't believe we've ever had a champion, even in MMA. Don't hold me against this, I'm telling you. I don't believe we've ever had a champion, even in MMA, that met the limit that wasn't named Brock Lesnar. It doesn't favor the bigger guys unless they're grappling heavy. And no matter how many times we cover this, clearly as the biggest, loudest voice in the entire space of MMA, there seems to always be the pushback from the water cooler from the day that some guy's kid got his ass kicked on the playground, and we had explained it to the coworkers his next day. He had to go, well, yeah, Junior got a black eye, but the kid was bigger than him. We always seem to default to that. No matter how many times a bigger guy and a smaller guy fight, and the bigger guy loses. It is a size disadvantage when, and I must add this asterisk, you're talking about a stand-up fight. So when you guys were looking at Till and Masvidal, and you were all leaning towards Till, and you're not wrong to look at Till. Till is a complete stud. Even with the loss of his last two fights, Till's a top 5 guy in the world and will climb back up to a top 2 and 3 and possibly a champion. Don't forget how young he is. None of this is a commentary or rebuke on Darren Till. It's just to point out what's right in front of everybody's face. But nobody wanted to take it in that direction. They just quickly dismissed Masvidal as too small. And there never seemed to be any other legs or arms to this octopus. That was it. That was the fight. Nothing to see here. Let's put it in England so The hometown crowd can come out and support Till even though we know the outcome of his contest. Okay, so you have that analysis from me. But there's another historical fact that seems to be overlooked. And even I did not bring this up. I must admit to you guys, I thought it, I didn't find it compelling, and I didn't have my numbers in line, so I never mentioned it to you guys. But I think even after the fact, you'll appreciate the fact. There is something very real about a number one contender in his next fight not looking very good. And many of the former number one contenders that go back into the mix in their next fight, many of them did get their hand raised. But I will stand by my statement that they didn't look very good. It might have looked good enough to get it done that night. But there's just a slip. And I don't even have an opinion for you as to why, but I can tell you it's a very real thing. I can tell you there is something about being out there, being in the spotlight, having the attention, and buying into the fact, okay, I've made it to the top of the mountain. I've gone as absolutely far as you can. And because of that experience, and because of that knowledge, I am now a veteran. And whatever I do next is going to be easy. And it falls in line with people believing that the really hard fights are the really big fights. And the less big fights are easier fights. And that is wrong. I don't give a goddamn if you're at the dog park in an amateur fight in front of 80 people for no money and no attention and no cameras and no media. You can have a really hard fight. And it doesn't matter if you're in the cage over at Bellator or in the UFC. It doesn't matter. That may not physically be a harder fight, but I will concede to you it is a much bigger fight. And there seems to be something very real about that. I'll bring Conor McGregor into the mix because it's a name you guys will recognize. But when he went into the Khabib fight, he spoke about this at the press conference, and it made me think twice about Conor in that fight. And he was talking about how this fight, as big as it may seem to you people, is half the fight that I just got done with. This will do half the numbers and half the attention and half the gate of what I just did with Floyd. So as impressed as you guys may be by what's on the line for Khabib, I have been there and I have done that. These were his words. I am not quoting, but I am absolutely paraphrasing for you his words. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, one's got nothing to do with the other. I'll personalize this. The second fight I ever had in my life, I fought 49 men. The second guy I ever fought, I fought for free at the Roseland Theater in Portland, Oregon in an amateur fight in a professional wrestling ring because the promoter couldn't even shell out the cash to get a ring. That same opponent I rematched. And guess where I rematched him? In the UFC on live television at the Hard Rock Casino in the first fight of the night. Just to put in perspective for you, the hard fights and the big fights do not go hand in hand, and the athlete that falls for that will fall on his sword. I'm not offering to you right now a commentary on Darren Till, because that would sound as though I'm being negative to Darren Till. It's just an analysis that a lot of guys go through, and I also happen to think, based on that historical statistic, that Darren Till was going to underperform. I just happen to think that. I'm sharing it with you guys now, but it's a very real thing. I've watched a number of other amateur fighters. Here's one that comes to mind. Chris Lieben, in his either first or second fight, fought Pat Healy on an amateur card in either Pat Healy's first or second fight. It was a split decision. It went to Lieben, and they both went on to the UFC. Just by example, that was a tiny, small fight that nobody wanted to see and nobody was talking about it. Later in their career, if I was to tell you that Chris Lieben was going to fight Pat Healy, you would stop what you were doing and you would turn on your television and watch. So some of it is just timing. But I see this misconception happen constantly, where a top guy fights a guy that's ranked and separated by him by 8 or 9. The number 2 guy fights the number 10 guy, and the number 2 guy automatically thinks, I'm 8 spots better than this guy. And you find out one has nothing to do with the other. Then you find the guys that are ranked somewhere in the top 5, and they refuse to fight somebody unless he's got a household name, because he's not worthy of their time. Those guys know the secret. They are pretending and projecting to the world that the guy isn't worth their time when they know what I'm actually telling you right now, which is those fights are razor thin. It's not just through 2 through 10, 2 through 20 is anybody's ball game on any given night. But there is something in the past about guys coming off of title fights who underperform in their next outing.